Hi, thank you very much for your time. And Yuli, thanks for inviting me to this. I don't know if you know it, but in 2019 we did our big pivot, and your this venue was the first time we presented our current product. So it's always a pleasure to be part of your team and to hang out. So hi, I'm John Butler. I'm the CEO and founder of QuantumCyte. We're a Silicon Valley-based life sciences tools or biotools company. And what our company does is we talk about unlocking the maximum value from every tissue slide. And that'll become apparent as I go through the talk what that actually means. We preserve the connection between what a pathologist sees and what's actually measured on the molecular level. Real quick about my team, I have an amazing team that covers research development as well as commercialization and finance. This team has been together for about the last 7 or 8 years, building this product, gone through various pivots, and we're your typical first-time founders. We're a little bit stubborn, but we focus on customer requirements and ensuring that the product has product market fit, and we're at that point. We have an amazing team of advisors, including MD, PhD pathologists, R&D with Ron Davis, as well as commercial advisors. The company has gone from technical company, and we're now in a commercial phase. We're building our commercial system for launch at the end of this year for our early access program. So our mission statement is that we enable our clients to drive the right therapy decisions at the right time for every cancer case. And the problem that we're solving is about 25% of solid tumor biopsies fail to yield conclusive molecular results. And even when they do get a result, many of those samples lack the signal needed for confident therapy decisions. So the reason that 25%, and this is a problem for every single reference lab in the world, 25% of the samples just don't have enough tumor in the biopsy to yield a clinical next generation sequencing result for a standard panel. And it's not that they don't have enough tumor, it's that the process for harvesting tumor from the biopsy uses a razor blade. So a pathologist will look at the sample, they'll look at the tumor under a microscope, and they'll make a call as to how much tumor is in that sample. And if it's greater than 30% tumor, they'll send that to the NGS lab for if it's less than 30%, they'll typically reject the sample, and then the patients go back into the system, typically getting cut again, and they try again for a biopsy. What our technology does is we go in and we can extract DNA just from the tumor. We boost the purity of that sample so it passes the clinical spec, and we're able to get patients identify biomarkers for drug treatment for those patients. So the impact is repeat biopsies for the patients, delays in treatment, as well as wrong treatments, significant lost revenue to the labs, as well as a negative financial impact on the healthcare system. So what we do is we bridge the gap between pathology and molecular insights. What we deliver is automation that drives speed, high precision that just drives conclusive results, as well as a unique data analytics platform. Our customers are the Quest Diagnostics of the world, Mayo Clinics, LabCorps that are running lots and lots of samples on a daily basis. They want automation because right now they have a manual process, and they want this precision that increases the signal to noise in the sample to quote unquote rescue those what are called the samples that wouldn't otherwise yield a clinical spec. So this is an example of a sample that we ran in a study with Singapore General Hospital. This sample would never have gone to the lab because of lack of enough tumor in the sample. When we ran this sample in the current process on the left-hand side, we did not detect a mutation. Now on the right-hand side, when we ran it with a QuantumCyte workflow, we went and extracted DNA just from that tumor. We identified two markers, P53 and APC markers. These are markers that if a patient has, they can get access to cetuximab from Merck. This patient actually got access to cetuximab and immunotherapy and was able to get on a treatment plan. Otherwise, they would have been put on chemotherapy. So this is why we do what we do. We get patients the therapies and the medicines that they need. We're working in about a $23 billion total addressable market. We have multiple active commercial deals. We have about 26 issued and pending patents, of which I think 18 have been issued across the globe. And in the middle here, these are some of the groups that we're working with, including Roche, AstraZeneca, Merck. I mentioned Quest and so forth to bring our system into their labs. The next steps for the company are commercial launch in Q4 of this year, where we're launching our early access program. We're working with a couple of clients that want to bring the system in early to clinically validate the system. They'll work closely with us so we can understand how to integrate our system into their current molecular pathology workflows. Along with that early access program comes a purchase order, which is a requirement for that early access program. So what is the product? It's hardware, software and analytics, and consumables. I won't go into too much detail on this. We make our money by selling consumables on a recurring revenue basis, as well as our software. This is how the workflow works. On the left-hand side, we have an image of a solid tumor. We use artificial intelligence to identify where the tumor, or a pathologist will manually identify where that tumor is using a touch screen and a marker. But we can integrate with AI models to automate that process. We take that AI information, that spatial information, and we translate that using our proprietary software into a format that allows us to go in and physically extract DNA just from the tumor. This step 2, black are the areas that you don't want DNA from, white are the areas that you want DNA from. So what we've done is we've created a polymer that we dispense through an off-the-shelf inkjet printer that actually coats the top of the tissue in the black area. That polymer solidifies and actually encases those non-tumor cells within that polymer in a hard plastic. And the next step in the process is we simply dissolve the cells directly on top of the slide, and then the DNA goes into solution. We collect the DNA, and then we submit it for downstream nucleic acid sequencing. We don't touch the pathology. We don't touch the sequencing. We're simply a pre-analytical step in the workflow that replaces this manual process. We do have competitors, and we check the box on throughput, precision, automation, as well as cost and labor costs across our competitors. And our go-to-market strategy is we will be doing an early adopters or an early access program this year. We're working with 2 and looking for a 3rd clinical lab. These are large clinical labs that we're working with to bring our system as part of the early adopters program into their workflows. And again, I mentioned as part of this program, there's a recurring revenue purchase order that they'll be placing with us. Again, we go into the labs, we work with them for 3 months is what we budgeted for to get the system clinically validated. We are doing a raise to support the early access program. And then going into 2027 through 2031, you can see we'll be doing going into the clinical and pharma markets. Clinical and pharma markets it can continue to expand the business, and then with full market expansion in 2029 to 2031. We're currently raising about $5 million on a $35 million post-money safe. Milestones, I mentioned commercial launch at the end of this year, Q4, and we're looking at about $50 million of revenue in 2029 when we become cash flow positive. Use of funds will be for R&D, commercial, G&A, as well as CapEx and IP. So what we're doing as a company is we are preserving the connection between what the pathologist sees and what's measured at the molecular level. Again, I mentioned trying to drive the right therapy decisions at the right time for every cancer case. Thank you for your time. Happy to take some questions.
Thank you, John. Let's see what we have as far as judges' questions goes.
Hey, just a couple of quick questions. What's the initial cost for someone to get into this, the anticipated cost? And then what's the ongoing cost for an organization? And what technical issues still remain? And the third question, while I can have the floor, is are there some regulatory processes that you have to follow, and where are you in that process?
Yeah, so I'll address the regulatory. We sell into labs that run lab developed tests, so they're under CLIA. So a research use only is perfectly fine for them because the validation of the system is actually incumbent on the lab, right? Not to say that we aren't going after FDA compliance and basically in terms of ISO 1345, but there are no regulatory requirements for the system going into a lab developed test. So it's RUO. We are a pre-analytical step, right? So we're not touching what I would say is any of the steps in the process that will require a large clinical trial, right? So with a couple hundred samples they can run to validate the system in their clinical workflow, right? And then on the question of cost, so we do a recurring revenue model. So you can purchase the hardware, and the hardware is about $350,000. The labs we're working with are high volume labs. We actually prefer doing a recurring revenue model where they like a SaaS type model where they sign up for a certain number of consumables per month, and that actually offsets the cost of the hardware. So we actually install the hardware at no charge, but they sign up for a recurring revenue model, of which the payback for the hardware is about a year to a year and a half with these recurring revenue models. Labs don't want to purchase specs; they want to move their cost to OpEx, which is kind of an easier justification.
How do you pay for the machine then?
We'll do a lease option, or we'll even rent it to the client. So
But
we'll
but you
typically
have
lease it.
but you have
Yeah,
manufacturing cost, right?
yeah. So that I gave you the price of 350. Our
Yeah, right,
costs are
right.
substantial. So we got about a 45% margin. And by
Okay.
the way, the printer, the hardware, we OEM that from a supplier in Germany. The hardware is actually repurposed from the high-tech industry. My co-founder Badan is an Intel process engineer. And so we repurposed this printer that's used in the high-tech industry in several hundred fabs, for doing bonding of solar cells and so forth. And so that supplier, they're called Seuss Microtech, who has actually invested in the company. They're a strategic investor, and they're building the system with production bay for the system already, right? And so they actually provide service, maintenance, they deliver, they do training. They have 24-hour service and maintenance, which comes with the hardware.
Can can you say a little bit more, John, about the work you need to do on the other side? I'm pretty crystal clear on how you have to work with labs, but don't you need to get the NCIs or the oncology private practices aware that you exist so they're going to order the lab? I'm trying to figure out how it works on the
Yeah.
provider side. I mean, it was on one slide, but I'm not as crystal clear on how you envision that working or how
Yeah.
easy that will be to scale up.
Yeah. And so actually, Tony, you asked about technical challenges. The biggest technical challenge we have right now is continuing to teach our models because there's a lot of AI within our workflow. So I want to get back to that. We've proven the science. There's no longer question of whether or not it works. Now it's like building the system and teaching the models. Right. So Jay, from the payers and providers point of view, we don't manage payers and providers. Diagnostics, for instance, sells a test for $4,500, and we simply insert to this. So they get reimbursement. They're leveraging our system to differentiate from the
Yeah.
molecular pathology, or like the Tempuses and so forth. So we don't deal with any payers, providers, or any reimbursement. You get a cut, if you will, of their reimbursable. What they've said, we've asked different labs, because the price of the test is going to vary, and it's $1,200. Mayo is 5,000, et cetera. So if you want to talk about sort of the amount that we make, and we're still working on the pricing, and every single client is going to have a different price based on demand and the reimbursement. So they've signaled that anywhere from 5 to 10% of the total reimbursable cost they're willing to give us for the increase in performance. And that actually is pretty close to what they actually are paying right now for workflow.
Thank you.
Tina has a question, Lori.
Yes, please go ahead. Or Tina. Yeah.
Can you please elaborate on your paying clients where you currently on your slide for go-to-market, you list
Yep.
2026.
Yeah.
So do you have like signed contracts or MOU, or are you onboarding them?
So we have some LOIs, but we're at that. I mentioned in the chat, we're at that paid pilot to um, procurement, or actually purchase. We're at that stage. So we've done paid pilots with our clients, and now we're working through the purchase order process to get them into the early access program. So we have a couple $1 million in revenue from paid pilots. We do at our lab in Fremont, we do studies with groups that want to do like biomarker discovery, but most of those they want to get data for internal marketing to justify bringing the system in. We're a brand new system. It's a brand new technology. It doesn't exist on the market. So it's a bit of a hurdle, but also we had to prove the science, and we have to give our clients data for internal marketing, like I said. So we're probably a month or so away from a purchase order from two large reference labs for our early access program. We're just going through that process. They have said we want to do the early access. Now we have to go through procurement, and we've been working on that for the last couple months. Right. So we're just at that point. One purchase order, and it completely changes the entire makeup of the company. Because that's a proof point. If you're an investor, you said technology and it's great, and I see how it helps patients. I really need to see market validation because it is a brand new technology, and we understand that. We understand that we have to get through past that particular milestone.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a few seconds left, but I think we should move on.
Okay.
John,
And
thank you so much.
Hector and Lori, thank you for answering my question. That was great. For a first-time founder, that kind of information is really important. So thank you very much.
You're
Oh,
welcome.
sure. Yeah. Very interesting what you're doing there.